Hey guys, this is Miss Arlequin, and in this video we are going to be learning how to craft an effective concluding paragraph for our essays. Alright, so we've talked previously about the structure of an essay. We've talked about what makes up the introductory paragraph, what makes up an effective body paragraph, and today we're going to focus on our conclusion. So if we refer back to the hourglass shape that I use as an analogy for an essay, the conclusion is the reverse image of your introduction. With your introduction, you start out very general, and then as the paragraph goes on, you get more specific. Your conclusion does the opposite of that. You start out very specific in your conclusion, and then as the sentences go on, you start to get more general and bring it back out to the real world. So what we're talking about is we're talking about first starting by restating the thesis statement. And when we restate it, we want to use slightly different words. We also want to make sure that we start with a transition word. So the most simplest transition word would be to start with in conclusion. More sophisticated ones would be things like therefore or as you can see. After you've restated your thesis, you want to answer your reader's so what question. So your reader has read the essay and now they're wondering, so what? Why did I read this? Why did I spend all this time investing in this writer's thoughts? What's important about this? And so answering the so what question is basically you as the writer making sure you explain the importance of your essay, why the claims you've been making are important. What do they matter? What do they have to do with your reader's life or just the world in general? So this is, again, where we're starting to get more general and we're starting to bring it back to the real world or real life. Once you've answered the so what question, then you always want to make sure that you have at least a sentence or two where you're ending with a bang. The same way that we start our intro with an engaging lead or a hook to catch our reader's interest, we want to end with a hook that will leave our reader with something to think about even after the essay is done. Alright, so I like to follow some very simple steps when I'm writing a conclusion, right? So we've talked about some of them in the previous slide. Start with your thesis restatement. It might look something like this. As you can see, the irony in the short story The Chaser helps illustrate the desperation Alan felt in trying to win Diana's love. Without this ironic situation, the reader might not realize. And so then I start to bring it back into why it's important. This is the so what. It's how the story is being affected by the use of irony. Now, some people, and this is optional, will also not only restate the thesis, but restate some of the most important points. This is more important for persuasive essays, where you're trying to remind people of your reasons and why they should believe it. It's not really going to be necessary for other types of essays. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't use them for informative essays or responses to literature. They're just not really that necessary, and if you think about it, it's a little repetitive to be restating a lot of your points. You want to be repetitive in a persuasive essay because repetition is a good way to emphasize your points and to get people to believe or agree with what you're saying. But in other types of essay purposes, it really wouldn't match. All right, so then you want to answer the so what question. Again, you're showing your readers why this paper was important, what is meaningful and useful about the points you've been making in your essay. So you might use sentences that begin like this. It's important to realize how powerful desperation can be because, and so here I would talk about real life, what desperation is and how it affects people and its place in our world and people's actions. Or I could start something like this. I could say, after reading the story, people can learn that being so desperate can be a dangerous thing. And then I can elaborate and talk about how desperation can be dangerous in other situations, not just the one in the story with a person buying a love potion. All right, and then you want to redirect your readers. So give them, again, and with a bang, a hook, something to think about, a way that they can use the things you talked about in real life, what they can learn from characters' actions, something, again, that's just, it could be a call to action, something that's going to leave them thinking and possibly even doing something with the information they've gotten from your writing. So an example might be saying, sometimes in life, people do something that makes them feel guilty. Instead of hiding their actions, the best solution would be to, so this is almost like advice, Or you could do something like, if you ever find yourself in a situation where guilt is overwhelming you, the best thing to do would be, once again, this is an example of giving them advice and ways they can apply the learning from the essay. Now, you always want to make sure that in your conclusion, you don't just repeat your introduction, that you don't introduce a new point that you've not talked about in your body paragraphs. You don't want to do any kind of apologizing to your reader, and you certainly don't want to focus on only one main point of your essay. For example, if you've written about 2 different authors, you shouldn't only talk about one author or one story in the conclusion. That wouldn't be appropriate. All right, so what are some different strategies for leaving your reader thinking, ending with a bang? All right, so one strategy would be to end your essay with a call to action. That's where you use words that encourage the reader to take immediate action or to do something. You can end with a warning, so you're cautioning your reader that if they don't follow your advice, something unpleasant could happen. You could conclude with an image, words that invoke a picture in your reader's mind, so using really descriptive language. You could appeal to your reader's emotions, so you're using words that invoke feelings in your reader's mind. Or you can compare your main points to other situations. So again, making connections to the real world. So you give them facts or a situation that is similar to the ones that you've conveyed to your reader. So the way I said with the chaser, not just how desperation can affect you in terms of buying a love potion, but other ways in the real world that people being desperate can affect different types of actions or have different kinds of consequences. All right, so let's look at those steps all put together into one sample concluding paragraph. Again, this comes from the essay I've been modeling for you in all the videos, and my thesis was that John Collier's short story, The Chaser, illustrates that trying to fake true love will only lead to regret. In conclusion, the story The Chaser demonstrates the power desperation can have over a person's actions. Alan ignored the old man's warnings and ended up learning his lesson. That's why when he went back to the old man to ask for the poison, the love Diana gave Alan didn't work out so well. So before taking desperate measures in order to secure the person or thing you love, you really have to think about what's going to happen after. How far would you be willing to go for what you love? So I'd like you to think about how this student has followed the 3 steps for writing a conclusion. Where do you see the student restating their thesis using different words? Where do you see them answering the so what question? And where do you see them redirecting their readers with some text-to-world connections and leaving them something to think about? Okay, so now it is time to take what you've learned about concluding paragraphs and apply them to your own writing. So first, you're going to log into Google Drive. You're going to write your concluding paragraph. When you are done, you're going to use the self-revision checklist to evaluate your draft and begin making revisions. And then if a classmate is also done, and it does not necessarily just have to be your elbow partner, it could be any classmate who is done at a similar time to you, you can share your document with them and begin peer revising using Google Drive documents. If you need some further support on concluding paragraphs, there will be some links to some other videos in Edmodo, and you can also go to the Google Drive student resource folder. There's an entire folder on concluding paragraphs, including some samples and some further explanatory handouts.